After doing all his work, Yuan went to the airport to see a theme park. When he was about to board his plane, he transferred to another world. A wyvern almost hit Yuan and threw him into the ground. Spider-Woman, Shinra Kusakabe, Tinkerbell and Hermione are all above him. After daydreaming about all these unimaginable things, he meets with an old guy who asks him, as if he took the entrance test from the border country. It is very easy to say Yuan doesn't know about these, so the old guy drags him to test. On the testing ground, he was told by the judges that he is supposed to touch the stone to see what kind of magic spirit he has. Judges explained that their continent of Duya has a near infinite amount of magic types, but he doesn't even have any and is trying to get disqualified in the process. He walks out of the ground and meets the same old person who dragged him to the ground in the first place. He tells Yuan that he can become the greatest gardener there in the first place. His talent? Growing plants. Anyway, while growing plants, he saw a couple of men farming over a woman, who noticed his parking and ordered the boys to chase him down. When they find out that he is just trash, they leave him alone. Agonizing over his helplessness, he ponders. But the old guy comes into his room and tells him about fairies, which are entities that far outclass any type of magic in the world. The old guy gives him a seed, and after traveling the entire world, he doesn't know how to grow the seed. Luckily, Yuan knows Chinese. He can read and write Chinese, which was etched on the seed. He tried to grow these seeds multiple times with various techniques, but he failed tremendously. The last thing he did is he cut his hand and dropped blood into it. Still, nothing happened. That night, he went to Dame Forest and saw the same guys flirting with the same woman who ordered him to chase him. That woman turned out to be a vampire and killed two guys. Unfortunately for Yuan, the vampire knew that he was there, and so he was killed as well. But before he dies, a Chinese hero comes in and introduces himself as the blood demon from hell, and she tells him about taking his life as well. Jesus, my man can't take a breath. The bloody fairy can't kill him, so she killed the vampire instead of transferring vampire powers to revive him. Yuan wakes up and sees the fairy that saved him and asks her if she's the one he is calling. But the bloody fairy here won't take any jokes and says that she only saved his life because she wants to kill him herself. She lunged at him but was wounded in the process. She repeats by attacking Yuan, but she is the only one who is taking damage. A woman appears and tells them the legend is true, introducing herself as the chairwoman of the Shuyu Academy and explaining the relationship. The chairwoman gives Yuan a fairy guide and tells him to raise his hand possessed. Yuan commands her fairy to go back to her seed form. At her house, the chairwoman explained about the fairies and the leprechaun guidebook, telling him that she will give him her fairy seeds if he becomes her student and finds the vampire in the academy. Back in the house, he reads the book and the fairy guide appears, explaining more about fairies. And so the day comes and finally arrives at the academy to learn about fairies, but was stopped by a delinquent student, telling him to pick up his magic crystal. When he did, it exploded with radiant light, and everyone was in awe. Yuan possesses, scans everyone and immediately asks the girl out. Later he learned about his powers and finally trained in the academy. The delinquent challenges him to a duel. Yuan didn't really want any battle, but a carriage of royalty appears and demands the duel to start. The battle has started. Yuan won again and again by default. He collapses and wakes up in an unfamiliar place with a familiar face. Yuan wakes up in what seems like another world and takes care of the child he saw there. However, some goons appear out of nowhere and beat him up. He now actually wakes up now in the real world, and the fairy guide tells him that it's a fairy world and it's a strategy of fairies who were once humans. Yuan checks on Mo Fei and tries to clear a misunderstanding, but was interrupted as two girls enter the room, bringing in evidence. A knight appears, telling them about the plan for tonight, which Yuan overheard. Later at night, a person appeared in front of his house but was mistaken to be an intruder, so he sucker punched the person and knocked her out. Turns out it was the princess earlier that morning who was beaten to a pulp after the princess found herself with the same guy in the same bed. Princess notices someone outside, which turns out to be the two women who entered the infirmary in the afternoon. They are looking for the princess. They tried to hide, but when they were about to be found, Yuan bound them with rope and escaped together with the princess and told her to find a hiding spot. He confronted the vampire and summoned Mo Fei, who completely overpowered the two. But the knight appeared and battled Mo Fei too, but not before killing the vampire and calling him king. The battle was dragging on, but Mo Fei was clearly on the offside. Yuan called for help, and the fairy guide told her Mo Fei can only win through daily interaction and strengthening her fairy world. They went for choosing the second option. Princess suddenly appears and offers her help as she is a spiritual master. Transport to other Yuan saw Mo Fei passed as Hitman. He tried to interact, but she couldn't see him. The fairy guide told him that it was because he was already in the timeline. Mo Fei meets with the Yuan incarnation in that timeline, which is multiple throughout a short time. Mo Fei meets with the same guide, but this time she saves him from the bad guys as she remembered that she was also saved as well. The guy offers her a sword as a gift, which he previously refused to sell. Back in the real world, the knight made a technique to kill our boy, but Mo Fei saves him. Back in the fairy world, Yuan is trying to make a way for Mo Fei to see him, but the other guy can see him. This guy is Chad. Chad visits Mo Fei's house and Mo Fei immediately disables him and says as this was very rare for her to get any visitors. Chad then leaves the house and gives her sweets which he brings for her. The next day, they watch the sunset together at the top of the tower, with Chad telling about himself and his adventures. He asked Mo Fei to come with him. Then later, Mo Fei goes on some adventure with her sword, but hides it after seeing Chad with flowers. Later they visit Chad's house and Chad cooks for her. Later, she confessed that she is a killer, and Chad says he hates killing. But not her. On her next job, her boss says that she has to beware of Chad, but she ignores her boss and goes for her job. Mo Fei then asked Chad to meet her at the beach, but Chad said that he would come to the tower to meet her. The day arrived and Mo Fei went to meet, and Chad didn't come. After waiting for 3 days, her boss went to the tower to warn her, but got interrupted when suddenly they were attacked. She goes to check out by whom she was attacked, just only to find out that she got betrayed by the girl she saved from those bullies, and the mastermind was himself Chad. He betrayed her and attacked her. Chad and his fairy made a team and attacked her while Mo Fei failed with them, but she overcame them and tried to attack Chad, but he was protected by fairies. Seeing her failing, Chad offers her to be a fairy and survive and avenge her death on her own. Yuan attacks the guy but fails since he is not in their world in real life. Chad explains that he is just trying to evolve NPC, and they're the same. Then Chad leaves. Yuan tried to save Mo Fei by risking his life. Zero comes out and finally understands why he is so stupid. Yuan wakes up and understands the issue and leaves the fairy world. Yuan comes into the real world and turns into a Jigachit fairy, pops the knight in the gut, sending the knight into explosive defeat. Yuan wakes up and sees the chairwoman gives him 2 seeds as promised. The next day, 2 students were introduced to Yuan's class, Princess Anne Qi and Mo Fei. Yuan then goes to the library and asks for plant acceleration magic and meets the librarian giving him the scrolls he needs. But Yuan can't use the scrolls, so she eats the plant detection encyclopedia to help him. After some weeks, 2 fairies spring out of the seeds and Yuan manages to set them in his phone. Meanwhile, defeated knights went to their king and told them of their failure. The Mad King ordered them to kill the Master of Fairies and help them accelerate the growth of their empire. The chairwoman informs Yuan that he is also targeted by the knight, not only the princess. Yuan said he is going to get stronger. Also, the chairwoman told Yuan to leave the college and in return, she will teach him how to get stronger. But on the way, the librarian asks him to do some fetching quests of gathering scrolls and gives him some crystals. So the group then leaves for an adventure. Arriving at a lake, they meet with a dragon named Georgios who is mistaken for Yuan for someone else. The dragon then fled and left Yuan a flute to summon his side. After some time, they rested in a resort where they learned about the legend of Woody Lake and Lotus Frost Past. At night, a group of hunters appeared seeing this Yuan summon the dragon Long, but they betrayed him and fell Yuan into the lake. No Fei went after him and found nothing, so she returned to the fairies. They then overcome all the problems. And the story ends with the princess and Yuan riding into the unknown top of their newfound transport. Do like this video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon for future updates.